evening. I was hoping for it to be live, and I'm sorry that it is not, but I am very excited to be talking about this topic that is near and dear to me. Um, how do we talk to our kids about any difficult topics, and in particular, about LGBTQIA plus when maybe we don't know as much as we could. Um, so we're going to start here. All right, so why is this an important topic? First of all, LGBTQIA plus kids are at a much higher risk for mental health issues, suicide, substance abuse, self-harm. They're 4 times more likely than their hetero or cis counterparts to be at risk of violence and suicide and the rest of these kind of risky behaviors. So we know right now, this was a 2019 Trevor Project found that more than 1.8 million LGBTQIA plus kids were seriously considering ending their lives. And again, that's 4 times more than their hetero and cis counterparts. So whether your child is in the LGBTQIA plus category or not, chances are they're going to know somebody who is, and you may be saving your own child's life or one of their friends just by having open, honest conversations. So that's why this is so important. Any topic that is uncomfortable, like money, politics, sex, death, they're hard to talk about, but not talking about them doesn't make them go away. It makes it worse. It increases confusion, risk behaviors, fear, shame. So we really want to make sure that we're talking about these things. And one of the biggest issues, I think, when you don't know about these topics and you're just starting to learn, I think we automatically think about sex. And this is not a sex topic. This is a love topic. Okay. We're talking about loving ourselves, respecting ourselves. We're talking about being in love with other people. So it's important to keep that in your minds. Talking to kids about difficult issues teaches them to embrace their natural curiosity, to normalize differences, whether it's in the gender and sexuality realm or in any other realm. It also encourages respect for themselves and for everybody else. Okay, you guys have seen me before, you know I can never moderate my slides here, so I'm trying. Seriously. There we go. Okay. So some things to keep in mind when you're talking about these sorts of topics. And I don't think that is the next slide. There it is. All right. We want to start early. The earlier, the better. And always keep in mind, we're talking about love and respect, right? And it's never too early to talk about love. From the times our babies are in our arms, we're telling them how much we love them, right? You want to create a safe space. You want to encourage your kid when they're being open and honest with you. If they're asking you questions, those might be hard questions to ask. If they start talking about tricky topics, right? We want to encourage them for that because that is not easy to do. Let them know by validating them that you understand their discomfort, right? These are tricky things to talk about, kiddo. I'm really proud of you for bringing this up, right? You want to let them know that you appreciate and respect their openness and honesty. Something to keep in mind, and again, this is whether your child is in the LGBTQIA plus category or not. Things like limiting their access to friends or events or resources, or even making jokes about LGBTQIA plus people, um, it can be just as destructive to their sense of self as like disowning your child, right? We hear about people finding out their child is gay or trans, and they kick them out. They're not my child, right? And as destructive and as damaging as that is to a child, um, so are the more nuanced and insidious types of behaviors, like making jokes or not allowing them to be parts of, maybe a prism group in school, or having access to people like them so they can ask questions. We want to make sure that we're listening. This is really important too, because our adult brains tend to like go to this, crazy place when our kids start talking about things. We want to make sure that we understand what it is they're actually asking us. And we don't always need to go further or into more detail, right? So if a question says, what does gay mean? Right? They're not talking about sex. They just heard this word gay, right? And so you're like, okay, well, gay means when two men are in love, or when two women are in love, right? And you can end it right there if that satisfies their question. We don't have to go into, everything else. Okay, not until they're ready. And it's okay not to understand our kids' experiences. Kids today are, they hear, whether it's in social media or in the classroom or books that they're reading, or whatever, they hear about people who are different than themselves, which is fantastic, right? We want them to know there are different people in the world. And they may be learning about stuff that we didn't know about until we were older, or maybe have never even heard about. And so it's okay to not understand what their experience is, but we can be respectful and supportive, and we can continue to teach ourselves, right? It's totally cool to go and look something up. Say to your child, I'm not really sure, but I'm going to get back to you on that. You want to be honest. If you don't know an answer, right, tell them you'll find out. And always keep in mind your child's developmental age. You can be honest without telling them stuff they're not ready for. And you want to keep the conversation going. So this is not the type of conversation that you have one time at one point and you're done, you're off the hook, right? This is something that you're going to start when they're little. And things that over time, as they grow, when you see a movie or reading a book, or something happens in current events that brings up these topics, right? Then you have a great opportunity for continuing the conversation. Some additional tips and tricks. If your child is questioning or they're coming out to you, you want to make sure that you're giving yourself space and time to grieve, if you need it, for your expectations. We all have expectations for our children from the second we know that they're going to be ours, right? Whether we know that we're going to be adopting them, or we know that they're in our bellies, right? We have expectations. So when something changes those expectations, it's okay to take some time and grieve the loss of that expectation. And then the flip side of that is honoring what are the new expectations, right? We don't know what's coming, but they're still our child, and we're still hoping for, all the best for them, for love and joy and health and success, you know. But if you need to take that time, take it. You want to find support if needed. Other families are going through the same thing. There's some resources here. Transforming Families, PFLAG, and the Family Acceptance Project are all national resources for families who are trying to navigate situations where they're unsure if their child is is coming out in some way and they need resources. They don't know what to do next or how to support their child best. Remember, this isn't the only aspect of their life, right? If they're in band or they're in sports or they're in, whatever, make sure you're still doing all those things that make your child your child. The only thing that's changed when your child comes out to you, the only thing that has changed is the amount of information that you know about who your kid is, right? Everything else is the same. They're still the same child. Really important not to disclose anything about what your child has told you without their permission. And sometimes that means waiting a beat before you tell a spouse or a partner. Kids don't always feel as comfortable disclosing information with the adults in their lives. So we want to, be very cautious and make sure that we always have their permission before talking about their situation. And we want to be advocates for our kids. We might never be able to change somebody's mind, but we can absolutely let them know what our expectations are for how they treat or talk to our kids. Okay, so we are going to talk. I'll get there. All right, so we're going to talk about the power of language. So there's two parts of language that we're going to talk about today. One is vocab. We're going to really just quickly kind of go through some terminology that you may be aware of, you may have heard, but aren't really quite sure what the differences is, or maybe you know all of this and you can go grab a cup of tea. The other part of what we're going to talk about is pronouns, okay? So first, as far as vocab goes, we're going to talk about gender first. So sex assigned at birth. This is determined by usually the first medical professional that lays hands on your child at birth. They're going to look at external anatomy and say, oh, it's a boy, it's a girl, or we got to look further into this because oftentimes there are intersex infants born where it's not super clear what the genitalia are. Maybe they're somewhere in between, maybe they're both. And so that is your sex assigned at birth. When we talk about the word gender, we're talking about something that is determined by culture. These are the feelings, behaviors, and attitudes that we attribute to somebody's biological sex. So you think about these gender reveals that people are having these days. Boys are blue, girls are pink. That is a culturally attributed gender norm, okay? We make that stuff up. Gender identity, this is determined by the individual. Usually by the age of 5, a human being knows their internal gender status, okay? They may not have the vocabulary or the knowledge to be able to describe that, but they know who they are, right? This is their gender identity. It does not always match the sex assigned at birth. Gender expression, this is determined by the individual's presentation. This is how they choose to how they choose to show themselves in public. This might be a hairstyle, it might be clothing, it might be mannerisms or the voice that they use. This is how they're expressing their gender to the public. And again, this is not always going to match your sex assigned at birth, and it might not match your gender identity. Unfortunately, there are a lot of times where somebody is expressing their gender in a way that is not in line with their gender identity for safety issues, okay? So the word transgender means when the sex assigned at birth and the gender identity are not the same. Cisgender, or sometimes just cis, we hear, this is when your sex assigned at birth and your gender identity are the same. And gender nonconforming, And sometimes we hear gender fluid or non-binary. This is somebody who identifies as both genders, neither gender, or somewhere along a gender continuum. It's really handy to kind of think of gender as a continuum as opposed to this either or, right? We know now, science has taught us now that gender is not A or B, male or female, pink or blue, right? It is a continuum, and we all fall along this continuum differently. Okay, I went the wrong way again. Here we go. Some more terminology. Queer. So some of us older folks tend to recoil a little bit when we hear the word queer used because it used to be a derogatory term. However, our LGBTQIA plus folks have taken it, reclaimed it, and it's now used as a term of empowerment. Okay, so the word queer is often used as sort of an umbrella term. This can signify gender or sexual identity, or even a political identity of like non-normative identities, but anybody can, in an empowering way, use the term queer. The Q in LGBTQIA also means questioning. And this does not mean that they're confused. It means that they're currently exploring or discovering or unsure about parts of their gender or their sexual identity. And it's really important to remember this little nugget. Questioning all parts of our identity is a normal process of development. It is the reason for adolescence, right? Adolescence is the time that we are figuring out who we are, who we want to be, who are the kinds of people that we want to be and be with, right? So questioning is an absolutely normal part of every human being's development. Coming out is a term that we use to describe when an LGBTQIA plus individual chooses to disclose who they are. This process is different for everybody. You may have a child at 5 years old say, I know that, you're treating me as a boy, but I'm a girl inside and I need to be a girl now. And from that point forward, that process of coming out is done if they are raised as their gender identity moving forward. This may be a process for somebody who starts later in life and they have a realization and they tell one person and then maybe they tell a couple people, maybe they never tell some people. Coming out can be a lifelong process and it varies so greatly. Sexual orientation, that means it's a description of who we're attracted to. Lesbian is a woman who's attracted to other women. Gay typically is used for a man who's sexually attracted to other men, but sometimes it's used more of an umbrella term for anybody who is attracted to their same gender. Bisexual is a person who is attracted to both men and women. Pansexual is a person who is sexually attracted to all people regardless of gender identity. And asexual is a person who has no sexual attraction for other people regardless of gender identity. So with kids, if I can, oh man, I am the worst with these slides, you guys. Sorry about that. Okay, so with kids who are questioning or learning, or they know exactly what they are and we're trying to figure it out with them or for them, sometimes we use things like the gender unicorn. And I'll just kind of show this for a minute. What I really like about this is if you look at the unicorn, up at the top you see a rainbow. The rainbow depicts what's in the mind of the unicorn, right? That's synonymous with the gender identity, right? You see these green dots all to the left. going from horn to feet. This is your gender expression. It's how you present yourself. By the heart, we have the heart, and this is who we're attracted to, who we fall in love with. And then we have our little double helix here by where the genitalia would be, right? And this tells us about your sex assigned at birth. Okay. So it's a really nice way of depicting kind of the whole package in one really easy to learn and easy to kind of conceptualize picture. There's also the genderbread man and some other teaching tools that are used, but I'm partial to the gender unicorn. All right, pronouns. Pronouns are a part of speech used as a substitute for a noun, like a person's name. They help to identify what or whom a sentence is about and are frequently used for efficiency. So we're not saying something like, Dr. Larson is talking about Dr. Larson's experience treating children at Dr. Larson's clinic. And, you know, that gets like really wordy and boring and inefficient, right? So we use things like she or he. In English, when we're talking about a person, historically, we haven't had a whole lot of choices, right? We have he, she, or they. And many of us have been taught that they is only to be used as a plural pronoun. That's actually a misnomer. So the Oxford English Dictionary tells us that since 1375, the word they is absolutely appropriate to be used as a singular pronoun. So there you have it. In a lot of other languages, there are different pronouns to be used for people. If you're writing a sentence about people and you're not sure of the gender of the people you're writing about, they have pronouns for that, right? We don't have a whole lot of options. So we have, you know, recently in the last, 20, 30 years, we've really created a lot of new pronouns to be able to make people comfortable in speaking and writing about themselves or others that is much more inclusive. Here is a chart of some different pronouns. So I thought this was really kind of cool. So here, 4 lines down, 3 lines down, we see the he, him, his. We're all, familiar with that. And then a couple more down, we see the she, her, hers, and the they, them, theirs. But then we also have all these beautiful new pronouns of they and a, fair and air, am, airs, the, ver, this. I'm not even sure how to pronounce some of these. But these are ways that people can feel comfortable in describing themselves in language that works for them. I think this is pretty cool. I love that our language is constantly evolving, especially for things like inclusivity. All right, so you'll notice that across that chart, there were 5 sets of pronouns, and this is why. So the 5 different types of pronouns are the subject, the object, the possessive pronoun, and the reflexive pronoun. And I'm not going to give you a really long grammar lesson, just real quick, because it's important that we understand why. So the subject would be like, she laughed at the notion of a gender binary. They tried to convince her that asexuality does not exist. Her, again, it's the same word, but this time it's used as a possessive. Her favorite color is unknown. The possessive pronoun would be the pronoun card is hers. And the reflexive pronoun would be, well, first the subject is she, thinks highly of herself. So then if you go back here, you could go across and say, the thee, their, viz, verself in these, and kind of know how to use them in language. All right. So now that we know that we have all these options and we know that they're important, how do we do it? So one of the first and easiest things you can do is when you introduce yourself, even if it doesn't matter to you, if you're straight and cis and you've never really thought about gender as a thing, imagine the difference this would make to somebody who is somewhere in the LGBTQIA plus category, and you say, "Hi, my name is Dr. Larson. I use she, her pronouns. What's your name?" Right? How easy is that? And all of a sudden, this person is feeling like honored and respected, and they haven't even had a chance to say what their name is yet. Right? That's setting off a conversation or a relationship on this beautiful, equal, respectful, inclusive manner. We can put our pronouns in signature lines on our emails. I saw this several years back for the first time. It was a teacher over at Glenbard West that I had emailed on behalf of a student. And when I got the email back, I saw the he, her, he, his on there. And I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. How easy to let people know that you're an inclusive and safe person by just sticking it in your signature line on your email. So I immediately went to work and asked all my staff to do the same. I think it's a great way of letting people know that we're safe and that they're respected. So by introducing yourself with your pronouns, by putting them in your email, stuff like that, it normalizes the behavior. So then more people start to do it. And then it just becomes like part of an introduction, like a handshake. Not that we handshake anymore, we like fist bump or whatever. But that it's no different. It's a piece of interpersonal behavior that we just do, and it becomes a habit, right? And by doing that, we're honoring people and affirming their identity. And research shows that when people feel their identity being affirmed, it demonstrates respect, it reduces depression, clinical levels of depression, increases their self-esteem, and supports positive regard. Positive regard is one of the tenets of therapy. It is one of the pieces that makes change, that makes people feel that they are able to move forward. And so if you can do all of these things for a person just by saying, I use she, hers, what are your pronouns, right? If you can do that and it changes a person that much, that's pretty freaking powerful, okay? In therapy, we talk about priorities and values, okay? Grammar is important. We spend our formative years learning how to write a good, well-constructed sentence, right? And we don't want to use the wrong words. I don't care if, for example, they is used as a singular, because treating somebody with respect is never going to be a grammatical mistake. When you're talking to somebody, if you use the wrong pronoun, and if it's somebody that you've known for a while and you've always referred to them one way and now they're asking to be referred to differently, you probably will make a mistake. It doesn't come naturally to change words like that. And so we have to practice, and we make mistakes, quickly apologize, correct yourself, and then move on. Don't make a huge deal out of it. If you say she and you meant he, then you say, oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, he. blah, 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 and then move on. I found that at grammarly.com, they have an entire blog on inclusive language and writing in accurate, grammatically accurate, but inclusive language. And so I put the link on here. Um, so I thought that was pretty cool. So that's a good one, maybe to help your kids with if they're writing. Okay, so one more word on the writing before we go into like what's age appropriate. I was recently writing something and I wanted to use they as there's a non-binary character, and I wanted to use they as their pronoun. And as I went through writing this, it became really challenging to understand who I was talking about when, right? And the reason I'm saying this is I think it's important to acknowledge that even with the best intentions, sometimes our usage of pronouns, particularly in writing, might not be what we think they're going to be. And it is difficult to make these changes. You know, when people say, you know, use these different words now, when for the last 46 years we've been using, you know, other words or whatever, it is hard. It's challenging, and we need to be mindful of that. And also remember that it's worth it, because again, we're helping people increase their self-esteem, lower their depression, increase their positive regard, all those things. So it is worth it, even though it's hard. All right, so what is age appropriate? Starting at birth, we want to be mindful of our language and our own gender assumptions. Watch what toys and colors and friends your kid gravitates towards, right? Maybe your little boy absolutely loves his trucks and cars. Cool. Play with the trucks and cars, right? But we don't want to assume that, right? We want to give kids opportunities to play with the things that bring them joy and that they're curious about. Think about the words that you use when you encounter a new little friend, right? You're on the playground and you're going to talk to a new child. We tend to look at their clothes because faces are kind of hard to tell gender wise when kids are little sometimes, right? So we look at their clothes, which is their gender expression. And we might say something like, hey, little man, or, oh, what a darling princess, right? Try to use different language. Try to use something that's maybe a little more neutral. Kiddo. Kiddo is nice and neutral. You know, or hello, friends. You know, it's important to teach our kids that there's a lot of language out there that we can safely use that's not going to offend. You know, and not to say that you have to be always using gender neutral terms and that, you know, all of your toys have to be green and yellow, and always buy your child gender neutral clothing until they tell you who they are, right? You're the parent. You know what your kids need. Trust yourselves, trust your instincts. And if your kid is telling you something a little bit different than you think, you know, have those conversations. You want to read books that show all sorts of different families and different people. From the time our kids are babies, we have little board books that show a mommy and a daddy, and usually a boy and a girl, and they're usually white, right? And they're this like perfect little family unit. Make sure all your books don't look the same, right? Sometimes families have one parent, sometimes they have two. Sometimes they might be two mommies or two daddies. Some families have lots of extra parents around. We've got step parents or grandparents or other adults that are helping to raise a child that love them, right? So families look pretty different, and that's totally cool. Some families have darker skin, some have lighter skin, some have different cultures. Like, the books that we're teaching our children about the world should reflect the world. Um, there are some board books for babies. The hips on the drag queen go swish, swish, swish. I have a whole stack of books that I wanted to show you guys as we went through this. This is one of my favorites because it's so cute, and hilarious. Um, but there's all sorts of books, from the time that they're babies. Babies' first words, Pride 1, 2, 3, Love Makes a Family. These are great books for babies and toddlers. Preschool and kindergartners, some books are And Tango Makes Three. That's a penguin family. Donovan's Big Day, Daddy, Papa, and Me, This Day in June, Stella Brings the Family, and 10,000 Dresses. These are great for younger kids. When kids are in this age group, the preschool kindergarten age, and they're asking questions about LGBTQIA plus people, or what do different words mean, we want to use really simple and really concrete language. Answer the question and see if they have any more questions, right? This is not the age that we get into a whole lot, because typically their question is going to be a heck of a lot more simple and concrete than you think it is. So we want to just kind of keep it at their level. Grade school. So as kids begin to explore their identities and who they are and how they fit into the world, their questions will become more complex. You want to match your responses again with their developmental level. A good way to do this is to ask them how they feel about what they see in the world. So say they come to you and say, oh, my friend Johnny says he has 2 daddies, right? Cool. How does that make you feel? What do you think about that? Right? Turn the questions around. Ask them, what are they thinking about that? Because that's going to pull out what it is they really want to know, right? Maybe in your family, mommy does all the cooking, and your kid is really asking, like, well, who cooks for him if he has 2 daddies, right? Or who's gonna, maybe in your family, dads do, I don't know. I can't think of any other examples off the top of my head right now. But what I'm saying, your child's real question, what they're actually wanting to know, may have nothing to do with, like, the fact that these 2 daddies are, 2 men, and your kid's used to seeing a mommy and a daddy or whatever. It might be something completely separate from that. So you want to ask them questions. Some great reads for grade schoolers: Melissa's Story. Excuse me, one moment. The List of Things That Will Not Change, Born Ready, Ritu Weds Chodney, and Maiden and Princess. There's also a Knight and Prince. That's a similar story by the same authors. And for middle schoolers, the Tea Dragon Society, This Is Our Rainbow, and The Insiders. These are all books that have won awards for not only being like excellent books, but for being LGBTQIA plus inclusive. And at the end of the presentation, I do have a link to all of those books, so you don't have to be writing them down. Okay, so teenagers. So here, our kids are starting to express their own sexual orientation. They're watching their friends do the same. They're going to have questions. Again, we want to ask how they feel about their questions before you express your own opinions. The teenage years are a great place to start learning about your child's value system that they're creating, and to share your own, right? And then really reinforcing that we want to acknowledge and celebrate differences, right? We don't want our kids to be mini versions of ourselves. We want them to take the good stuff, right? And then do better on some of our, you know, our less favorite habits or behaviors. But it's a great place to really learn about who your child is from a moralistic and valued point of view. Some great high school books are Felix Ever After, The Henna Wars, The Black Flamingo, Cemetery Boys, Pet, and I Wish You All the Best. And by the way, these are all different genres too. We're looking at sci-fi, love and romance. We're looking at there's a supernatural kind of book in here. Like there's some really cool books. Okay, so some resources. The Trevor Project has a 24-hour hotline for kids or young adults that are feeling isolated, they're feeling lonely, they are just needing someone to talk to. So this 24-hour hotline here is really, it's a great place to be able to call and not feel alone. Youth Outlook is a local organization for kids, and I believe they also have parent resources. The kids I know who are involved in this absolutely love it. So I think right now their meetings are still virtual like this, but they're not, historically, they haven't always been, and it's a really good resource for kids, out in the suburbs here. Illinois Safe Schools Alliance is a great resource for parents advocating for their children. The Center on Halsted in Chicago is just an enormous resource. They have everything from anything you could possibly imagine under the LGBTQIA plus umbrella. There's advocacy, there's like political advocacy, there's youth projects, there's senior projects, there's just all sorts of things. Anytime I have a question or I'm looking for a very specific resource, that's who I call to find out. Because they've got their fingers kind of in everything, and they're an amazing group of folks. PFLAG, this would be a great resource if your child is coming out or you're trying to get more information. This would be a great resource. Unconditional Ministries. I have not worked with them personally, but I have heard really good things. This is a support network of Christian parents of LGBTQ children who are trying to hold both truths, right? They believe in the Bible and what they perceive the Bible says about homosexuality. And they want to love their children unconditionally, but they have conservative views, and they're trying to make sense of believing both. Right. And so this is a resource that helps navigate that very tricky place to be. And then the book resources that are throughout the rest of this presentation, they are from this mamasuncut.com. They're LGBTQ children's books. Most of them, I believe, can be found on there. If you have questions about the books or other books and you can't find them at the library, come and talk to me. I always have books that can be borrowed for families. So that is an option. All right, so that concludes my my little talk. If anybody has questions, I would love to take some time and answer them. Melissa, I'll turn it over to you for fielding the chat, I guess.
Okay, yeah, nothing yet. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat to me or Dr. Larson. You did a thorough job and answered all of their questions.
All right. You know what I did not put on my slides is how to get a hold of me. I'll drop that in the chat so that if anybody does have questions and they want to talk, you can absolutely get a hold of me. So my email, I can't talk and type at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like I can't navigate my own slides. Put that in here for you. It's Doc Larson at marvelousminds.net. Oh, and I should have put that to everybody. I think I can change that. Try that again here.
Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't let you like copy and paste out of, or at least doesn't
Yeah,
let
it
me.
didn't. It put in last thing I copied and pasted earlier today, which isn't going to help anybody because it was a banker. I don't think, well, maybe she could answer the questions. I don't know. Okay, there you go. So it's Doc Larson at marvelousminds.net. You can reach me there. I guess if there are no other questions, Melissa, is there anything that you can think of that I didn't cover or that was unclear?
I know there was a few questions I sent you earlier. I think you covered those pretty thoroughly though.
Okay.
I think we're good. And also,
right.
yeah, people can reach out to me and I can connect you with Dr. Larson as well.
All right, excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
There's something. Thank you so much.
What's that?
Oh, there was something in the chat, but they're just thanking you.
And I like to see those pronouns in there. That's awesome. All right. Hey, thanks for having me. This is such an important topic, especially now in Glen Ellen, you know, with our current events. You know, if you guys have questions, please reach out. This is stuff that needs to be talked about. All right.
Thank you very much. Our next session is not until January. I think I emailed that out to all of you. So we hope to see you there. Have a good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.